Damon Brooks was already safe when the canyon behind him exploded into a wall of fire. His truck was running, the road home was clear, and his 7-year-old son was waiting for him with no idea how close his father had come to death. Then, through the roar of burning trees and the scream of sirens, Damon heard a woman's voice from inside the smoke. "Leave me!" she cried. "I can't walk!" Every firefighter had ordered the area evacuated. Every instinct told Damon to drive away. But one thought nailed him to the ground if his son ever asked what kind of man he was. Could he live with saying he left someone to burn? So he soaked his jacket, covered his face, and ran back into the flames. He found her beneath a blackened boulder, bleeding, choking, one leg broken, her eyes full of terror, but her voice still commanding him to save himself. Damon lifted her anyway. He carried her through falling embers, through heat so violent it peeled the air apart. Never knowing the woman in his arms was Clara Voss, a powerful clean energy CEO carrying evidence against a billion-dollar development empire. He didn't know the fire had been set on purpose. He didn't know men were already hunting for the proof she had hidden. And he certainly didn't know that saving this stranger would drag him into a conspiracy of bribery, fraud, arson, and kidnapping. By the time Damon realized the truth, his little boy would vanish from school. A pleasant voice would call with a threat, and the choice would become unbearable. Destroy the evidence and save his son, or expose the monsters and risk losing the only family he had left. What would Damon choose when doing the right thing could cost him everything? Damon Brooks had learned a long time ago that fear did not always arrive with a scream. Sometimes it came quietly, slipping into your chest like smoke under a closed door. Sometimes it sounded like an engine idling on an empty road, like dry leaves snapping under burning branches, like the voice of a stranger calling from somewhere no one sane would ever go back to. That afternoon, Raven Creek Canyon was burning behind him. Damon sat in the driver's seat of his old blue pickup truck with both hands locked around the steering wheel, his knuckles dusted with ash. The evacuation road stretched ahead thin and gray, leading down toward town, toward safety, toward his small rented house where his 7-year-old son Milo would be waiting for him after school. Damon could already picture the boy's face. Curious, dark eyes, messy curls, one eyebrow raised the way he always did when he suspected his father was hiding something. "You're late again, Dad," Milo would say. And Damon would smile, ruffle his hair, and tell him there had been trouble at the worksite or traffic or some boring adult excuse that would keep the boy from asking too many questions. But no excuse would explain the way the canyon looked now. Behind him, the fire moved like it had a mind of its own. It rolled over the ridgeline in waves of orange and black, swallowing brush, climbing trees, throwing sparks into the sky like angry stars. Firefighters had been shouting orders for the last hour. "Get out! Move now! Leave everything!" Damon had obeyed. He had loaded his tools, tossed his jacket onto the passenger seat, and driven away with everyone else. He had made it out. That should have been the end of it. Then he heard the voice. At first, he thought it was the wind tearing through the canyon. The fire made strange sounds, hungry sounds, sounds that twisted into shapes your mind wanted to recognize. But then it came again, faint but unmistakably human. Help. Damon's foot pressed harder on the brake before he realized he had moved. His truck stopped in the middle of the road. He stared into the smoke curling between the trees behind him. No. His first thought was simple and final. No, no, no! He had a son. He had responsibilities. He had no equipment, no breathing mask, no backup. He was not a firefighter. He was not a hero. He was a construction worker with a bad knee, a mortgage he could barely manage, and a little boy who still sometimes crawled into his bed after nightmares. The smart thing was to drive. The safe thing was to drive. The right thing should have been to drive. But the voice came again, weaker this time. "Please." Damon closed his eyes. Milo's face appeared in his mind, not smiling now, but older, asking a question Damon hoped he would never have to answer. What did you do when someone needed help?" Damon cursed under his breath, grabbed the half-empty bottle of water from the cup holder and poured it over his work jacket. The water was warm from sitting in the truck all day, but it was all he had. He wrapped the soaked jacket over his head and lower face, shoved the door open, and stepped into the heat. The air hit him like a wall. Every breath burned. Smoke clawed down his throat and filled his lungs with the taste of ash pine sap and something metallic. Damon lowered his head and pushed forward, one arm raised against the heat boots crunching over scorched earth. The trail ahead had almost disappeared beneath drifting smoke. He knew this route. He had hiked it with Milo dozens of times on weekends when money was tight and nature was free. They had collected stones here, raced sticks down the creek, eaten peanut butter sandwiches on flat rocks warmed by the sun. Now those same rocks were blackened. The creek bed steamed. Branches cracked overhead like bones breaking. "Hello," Damon shouted, though the smoke turned his voice into a ragged cough. "Where are you?" For a moment there was nothing. Then from somewhere ahead and to the left, he heard a woman's voice. "Don't come closer." Damon almost laughed, though there was nothing funny about any of this. He stumbled over a burned root, caught himself against a tree trunk, then jerked his hand away when the bark scorched his palm. Too late for that, he yelled. He found her near a boulder at the edge of a narrow ravine. She was half sitting, half collapsed against the stone, her pale blouse torn at the shoulder, her dark hair streaked with ash. Blood ran from a cut near her temple down the side of her face. One leg lay twisted beneath her at an angle Damon did not like. But it was her eyes that stopped him. They were sharp gray clear despite the pain and full of a kind of fear that did not beg. It commanded. "Leave me," she said hoarsely. "I can't walk." Damon dropped to one knee beside her. "Then I'll carry you." "No!" She tried to push herself upright and immediately gasped, her face going white. "You don't understand. The fire shifted. The trail is cut off. If you try to carry me out, we both die." "Maybe," Damon said, pulling the wet jacket from his shoulders and draping it over her head. "But I'm not leaving you here." Her fingers caught his wrist with surprising strength. "You don't even know who I am." "Don't need to." For half a second, the two of them stared at each other while the world burned around them. Then something in her expression changed. Not trust, exactly. More like surrender to the fact that this stranger was either very brave or very stupid, and either way, she was out of time. "My name is Clara," she said. "Damon." He slid one arm behind her back and the other beneath her knees. "This is going to hurt. I know." He lifted her. Clara bit down on a cry, her hands clutching the front of his shirt. Damon felt the tremor run through her body. She was lighter than he expected, but the uneven ground, the smoke, and the brutal heat made every step feel like dragging iron uphill. "Hold on to me," he said. "I am. Harder!" Her arms locked around his neck. Damon turned back toward the way he had come, but the canyon no longer looked familiar. Smoke folded over the trail in thick gray sheets. The fire had moved faster than he thought. Flames crawled along both sides of the path, feeding on dry brush and low branches. The roar was everywhere now, above them, behind them, inside his skull. Left, Clara rasped suddenly. "What?" "Go left, less brush. The fire will move slower there." Damon hesitated only a second before obeying. He pushed through a curtain of smoke, coughing so hard he nearly dropped her. Clara tightened her grip and pressed one hand against his shoulder, steadying him. "You know this place?" Damon asked. "I've been hiking it for 3 years. Bad day to keep the habit." Even through the pain, Clara gave a faint, humorless breath that might have been a laugh. "I wasn't hiking." Damon wanted to ask what she meant, but a burning branch crashed down behind them and sent sparks exploding across the trail. He ducked, shielding her with his body. Heat seared the back of his neck. They kept moving. Every step became a decision. Left around a fallen trunk, right past a smoking stump, down into a shallow dip where the air was thicker, then up again toward what Damon hoped was the access road. His arms ached. His lungs felt scraped raw. Somewhere beneath the panic, he wondered whether Milo would remember the last thing he had said to him that morning. Finish your cereal, buddy. I love you. Such an ordinary sentence. Such a terrible one to leave behind. Clara's voice broke through his thoughts. Why did you come back? Damon adjusted his grip. Heard you calling. That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got. You have family. The question hit harder than the smoke. A son, Damon said. 7. Clara went quiet. They reached the ravine where the trail narrowed between rock and flame. Damon's boot slipped on loose gravel. For one awful second, his balance went. Clara gasped as his shoulder slammed into the rock wall, but he stayed upright. Careful, she whispered. Trying. Ahead, the smoke thinned just enough for him to see the access road. Damon's heart jumped. Then the wind changed. The fire surged across the path in front of them, a living curtain of heat. Damon stopped dead. There was no way through. Not carrying Clara, not alone, not alive. Damn it, he whispered. Clara lifted her head, scanning through the smoke with the focus of someone refusing to panic. There, she said, pointing toward a rocky overhang half hidden behind the blackened brush. We wait there. Wait. The wind is pushing the fire east. If we run, we die. If we shelter, maybe it passes. Maybe that's all we have. Damon hated it, but she was right. He carried her to the overhang and lowered her carefully against the stone. She sucked in a breath as her injured leg shifted. Damon crouched beside her and pulled the damp jacket over both of them. The heat became unbearable. The fire wrapped around their hiding place, roaring so loudly, Damon could no longer tell whether Clara was speaking or whether the sound was only in his head. His throat burned. His eyes streamed. He held one arm over Clara's shoulders, pressing her closer to the rock, as if his body could somehow bargain with the flames. Then Clara's hand found his. She gripped it tightly. Damon, she said, barely audible. Yeah, if we don't get out of here. We will. You don't know that. No, he said. But my son hates it when I break promises. That silenced her. Minutes passed. Or hours. Damon could not tell. The world narrowed to heat smoke and the pressure of Clara's hand in his. He thought of Milo again. He thought of the way his boy watched him, copied him, measured the world by what his father did. Damon had spent years trying to teach Milo that kindness mattered, that courage mattered, that a man was defined by what he did when no one forced him to do anything. Now he wondered if those lessons would make Milo proud, or leave him fatherless. Then slowly, impossibly, the heat began to lessen. The roar moved away. Damon lifted his head. The flames had shifted beyond the trail, leaving behind smoking earth and skeletal trees. The access road was visible again, distant but real. He looked at Clara. Her face was streaked with ash, her lips pale, but her eyes were open. Ready? He asked. No. Good enough. He lifted her again. This time, Clara did not argue. She only held on. By the time Damon reached his truck, his legs were shaking so badly he nearly collapsed against the passenger door. He set Clara in the seat, shut the door, then stumbled around to the driver's side. His hands trembled as he turned the key. The engine caught. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Then Clara looked at him through the haze of pain and smoke. You saved my life, she said. Damon pulled onto the road, heading for town, for sirens, for hospitals, for whatever came next. Don't thank me yet, he said, because in his gut, beneath the exhaustion and relief, Damon felt something cold beginning to form. Clara had not been hiking. She had been hiding something. And whatever it was, someone had been willing to burn an entire canyon to destroy it. By the time Damon Brooks reached the hospital, his body had finally begun to understand what his mind had refused to admit. His hands would not stop shaking. His throat felt scraped raw, every breath dragging smoke through his lungs, even though the air around him was clean now. A nurse had washed soot from his face, wrapped 2 small burns on his forearm, and told him he was lucky. Damon had almost laughed at that. Lucky people did not run back into wildfires. Lucky people did not hear strangers screaming from smoke. Lucky people went home to their sons without smelling like death. He sat in the emergency waiting room with a paper cup of coffee cooling between his hands, staring at the floor. His phone rested on his knee. Milo's school had already called once. Nadine had called twice. Damon knew he needed to answer, needed to explain why he was late, why his voice sounded broken, why there would be news helicopters over Raven Creek Canyon by nightfall. But what could he say? That he had almost made his son fatherless because a stranger needed help. Before he could decide, a doctor stepped into the waiting room. Mr. Brooks' Damon looked up. "Ms. Voss is asking for you." Clara Voss looked different without the smoke around her. Cleaner, paler, but no less intense. Her dark hair had been pulled away from her face, revealing a bandage near her temple. Her left leg was elevated, wrapped and braced. Pain sat in the tight line of her jaw, but her eyes were wide awake. "You should be resting," Damon said from the doorway. "So should you." "I didn't break my ankle." "No, you only ran through a wildfire carrying another person." Damon pulled the chair beside her bed closer and sat. "Doctor says you'll recover." "That depends." On your leg, Clara reached toward a small, scorched backpack resting beside the bed. "On whether they know I survived with this." Damon frowned. "Who's they?" For the first time since he had found her in the canyon, Clara hesitated. Then she unzipped the backpack and pulled out a charred notebook sealed in a plastic hospital bag. The edges were blackened, but the pages inside were mostly intact. "The fire wasn't an accident," she said. Damon stared at her. "You don't know that." "I do. Clara, the whole canyon was dry. Fires start all the time. Not 30 minutes after I found the documents proving a multi-million-dollar land fraud scheme." The room seemed to grow colder. Damon leaned back slowly, trying to understand whether the smoke had damaged his hearing. Land fraud. Clara opened the bag carefully and slid the notebook onto her lap. "Iron Vale Development is building a luxury resort in Raven Creek Canyon. Private villas, golf trails, spa retreats, the whole fantasy. On paper, it's supposed to be an eco-friendly project. Low-impact construction, protected habitats preserved, local jobs, clean energy, beautiful promises. Sounds expensive. It is. And almost all of it is built on lies." She turned the notebook so Damon could see the scribbled numbers, parcel codes, and rough sketches of canyon maps. They redrew survey lines to make the land look more valuable. They erased a protected wetland from their environmental report. They bribed inspectors. They inflated construction costs through shell companies. My company was bidding to supply energy to the resort. When my team inspected the site, the records didn't match what was on the ground. So I started digging. Damon rubbed a hand over his face. "And you went alone into an evacuation zone to dig some more." "I had a source inside Iron Vale. He told me documents were being moved today. If I waited, they'd disappear. And instead, the whole canyon caught fire." Clara's expression hardened. "Someone followed me, or someone knew I was there. The fire started near the storage point, not near the public trail. They wanted to destroy evidence." Damon stood and walked to the window. Outside, ambulances moved under the emergency entrance lights. People came and went. Normal life or something pretending to be normal. "This is police business," he said. "I don't know which police I can trust." "That's convenient." "It's not convenient. It's terrifying." Clara's voice sharpened. "Iron Vale has friends in county offices permitting departments law enforcement. Their project is worth too much money. If I go in with half the evidence, they bury it, bury me, and pretend none of this happened." Damon turned back. "Then take what you have to a lawyer, a journalist, the state, anybody but me. I didn't ask you to get involved. No, you just told me the woman I carried out of a fire may have been targeted by people powerful enough to burn down half a canyon." Clara looked away first. "There's more evidence still up there." Damon went still. "No, you don't even know what I'm going to say." "I know enough. I hid copies in a metal field box near the old ranger cut. Documents drives photographs. If Iron Vale's people go back before I do, it's gone. You have a broken ankle. I can use crutches. You almost died yesterday, so did you. And I have a son. The words came out louder than Damon intended. He saw Clara flinch not from fear, but from the truth of it. He lowered his voice. I have Milo. He is 7 years old. He needs me more than your evidence needs me. Clara's face softened, but she did not look away. You're right. The answer disarmed him. You should go home, she said. Hug your son. Forget I told you any of this. Damon wanted to. God help him, he wanted to. He wanted to leave that hospital, pick Milo up, make pancakes for dinner, and pretend the world was simple enough that right and wrong stayed in separate rooms. But as he looked at Clara, pale and bruised and still fighting to keep her voice steady, he knew the problem had already crossed into his life. He had gone back once. Walking away now would not undo that. What happens if they get away with it? He asked quietly. Clara blinked. The fraud, the bribery, the fire. What happens? The resort gets built. Protected land gets destroyed. People who helped cover it up get richer. Anyone who knows too much learns to stay quiet. And the fire, it becomes a tragic accident. Damon thought of the burning trail, the falling branches, Clara's hand gripping his in the smoke. He thought of Milo asking someday why the canyon they loved had been fenced off and sold to men who lied for profit. When he asked, Clara's eyes narrowed. When? What? When do we go back? For the first time, Clara looked truly surprised. Damon, I'm not carrying you out of one fire just to let you drag yourself into another alone. You don't owe me this. No, Damon said, but I owe my son a better answer than I stayed safe while bad people won. They returned to Raven Creek Canyon the next morning just after sunrise. Damon had slept less than 2 hours. Milo had watched him over breakfast with the suspicious silence of a child who knew adults were hiding something. When Damon kissed the top of his son's head and told him to listen to Nadine after school, Milo had asked, Are you going to do something stupid again? Damon had smiled weakly, trying not to, but as he parked near the burned trailhead and saw Clara leaning against a rental car with crutches under her arms, he knew Milo had read him perfectly. The canyon was no longer a wall of flame. Somehow that made it worse. In daylight, the damage looked deliberate. Black trees stood like bones. Ash covered the ground in soft gray layers. The air smelled wet and dead where firefighters had cut containment lines through the brush. You sure you can manage? Damon asked. Clara adjusted her grip on the crutches. No, but I'm doing it anyway. That seems to be a theme with you. With us, she corrected. They moved slowly. Damon carried a backpack and stayed close enough to catch her if she slipped. Clara knew exactly where she was going, leading him off the main path toward a burned clearing hidden behind a cluster of rocks. Near the base of a split pine stump, she stopped. There, Damon brushed ash from the ground and found the corner of a metal box. It was scorched, but intact. Clara's hands trembled as she unlocked it. Inside were folders wrapped in plastic, several USB drives, printed maps, and photographs. Damon did not understand half of what he was seeing, but he understood Clara's expression. Relief, vindication, fear. This is enough, he asked. This is enough to start a war. A branch cracked somewhere behind them. Damon froze. Voices drifted up from the lower trail. Boss said check everything. If she had copies, we find them. Clara's face drained of color. Damon grabbed her arm and pulled her down behind a fallen log. 2 men emerged through the smoke haze below, both wearing dark jackets, both carrying radios. They moved with purpose, scanning the ground. The fire should have handled it, one said. Should have isn't good enough. If Voss survived, she'll come back. Damon felt Clara go rigid beside him. The men passed within 20 yards. Damon held his breath so hard his lungs burned again. When their voices faded, Clara whispered, We need to leave. Damon loaded the evidence into his backpack and helped her move off the trail, keeping low through the trees. Every sound became a threat. Every shadow looked like a man with a radio. By the time they reached the truck, sweat ran cold down Damon's back despite the morning heat. Clara did not speak until they were on the road. They know, she said. Yeah, they know I survived. They know about the evidence. Damon gripped the wheel. Then we stop moving like we're scared and start moving like we have something they don't. Clara looked at him. And what's that? The truth. It sounded simple, maybe too simple, but something had shifted in Damon since the hospital. Yesterday, he had been a man who stumbled into someone else's danger. Today, he understood danger was not always something you could avoid by staying out of the way. Sometimes it grew in silence. Sometimes it spread because decent people decided it was safer not to look. He had spent his life trying to protect Milo by keeping their world small and steady. Now he realized that wasn't enough. If men like Ironvale could burn a canyon, threaten a woman, and erase the truth, then no one's world was truly safe. Not Clara's, not his, not Milo's. At Clara's apartment, they spread the evidence across her dining table. Maps, contracts, altered survey lines, fake environmental assessments. Damon listened as she built the story piece by piece. He did not understand the corporate language, but he understood theft. He understood men abusing power. He understood a cover-up. "So what do we do?" he asked. Clara looked at the documents, then at him. "We go bigger than them," she said. "State regulators, federal agencies, journalists. We make the evidence public before they can bury it. And if they come after us, they already are." Damon nodded slowly. The fear was still there. It had not left him. It sat in his chest, heavy and cold, shaped like Milo's face. But beside it now was something stronger. Decision. "Then we move fast," Damon said. "And we don't let them choose the battlefield." For the first time since the fire, Clara smiled. Not because she was safe, because the fight had finally begun. By noon, Clara Voss's apartment no longer looked like a place where anyone lived. It looked like a war room built by two people who had slept too little and trusted almost no one. The dining table had disappeared under stacks of contracts, survey maps, environmental assessments, printed emails, photographs, and USB drives. Red circles marked forged boundary lines. Yellow sticky notes pointed to missing permits. Blue tape connected names Damon Brooks had never heard of to companies that seemed to own other companies which owned other companies until the truth vanished behind paper walls. Damon stood near the window with a mug of coffee in his hand, watching the street below. Every dark sedan looked suspicious now. Every parked van seemed too still. A part of him hated what his mind was becoming. Yesterday he had worried about bills, work schedules, and whether Milo had remembered his spelling homework. Now he was counting exits, studying faces, and wondering how many people Ironvale Development could buy before someone finally said no. Behind him, Clara moved with fierce precision. Her broken ankle was propped on a chair, but the rest of her looked unstoppable. Pain had sharpened her rather than slowed her down. She flipped through a folder, pulled out 3 pages, and placed them beside a county map. "This is the wetland report," she said. "Officially, the protected zone ends here." Damon leaned closer. Clara tapped the map. "But the original survey places it almost half a mile farther east. Ironvale erased the habitat boundary to make room for private villas. Can they do that?" "No, which is why they paid someone to say the land was dry." Damon looked at the paper again. To him, it was just lines and numbers. To Clara, it was a crime scene. "So we take it to the state," he said. "That's the first move." The first, Clara's mouth tightened. "If the state fails, we go public." Damon did not like the way she said if. "You think they'll fail? I think Ironvale has had 3 years to make friends." An hour later, they walked into the State Environmental Commission building with a folder full of evidence and a hope neither of them fully believed in. The building was gray, square, and cold, the kind of place that made urgency feel inappropriate. People moved through the lobby carrying badges and paper cups of coffee. No one looked like they were there to stop a conspiracy. No one looked like they even wanted to hear about one. At the reception desk, Clara stood as straight as her injury allowed. "I need to speak with Commissioner Edwin Price." The receptionist glanced at Clara's bandaged temple, her brace, then at Damon. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but tell him it concerns Ironvale Development and Raven Creek Canyon." The receptionist's expression changed just slightly. Not surprise, recognition. "Please have a seat." They waited 38 minutes. Damon counted every one of them. Clara pretended not to be angry, but he could see it in her hands clenched around the head of her cane. Finally, a tall man in a dark suit appeared at the end of the lobby. His silver hair was perfectly arranged, his smile polished flat. "Ms. Voss," he said, "Commissioner Price, come with me." His office had expensive furniture, framed awards, and a wide window looking over the Capitol courtyard. Damon noticed the photographs on the wall, Price shaking hands with governors, donors, businessmen. In one frame, half hidden behind a crowd, was the Iron Veil logo. Clara noticed it too. She wasted no time. She laid out the altered surveys, the missing wetland designation, the suspicious approvals, the chain of shell companies connected to Northbridge Holdings. Her voice never shook. She did not exaggerate, did not plead, did not ask Price to believe her. She simply placed the facts in front of him and waited for the truth to matter. Price listened with the patience of a man already deciding how little he would do. "These are serious allegations," he said when she finished. "They are not allegations," Clara replied. "They are documented violations. Documents require verification. Then verify them." Price folded his hands on the desk. "You understand Iron Veil is a major economic project for this region. Jobs, tax revenue, tourism. We cannot halt construction because of one competing bidder's interpretation of land records." Clara went still. "Competing bidder? Your company lost the energy contract for the resort. My company withdrew after discovering fraud." "That is your version." Damon felt heat rise in his chest. "People could have died in that fire." Price turned to him as if noticing him for the first time. "And you are the man who carried her out of it. How admirable. But wildfires are not under this commission's jurisdiction." Clara leaned forward. "The fire was set to destroy evidence, then go to law enforcement. We did. Nothing moved. Then file a formal complaint and allow the process to work. The process is exactly what Iron Veil bought," Clara said. Price's smile vanished. "Be careful, Ms. Voss." Damon stood. "No, you be careful. Because if what she's saying is true and you ignore it, you're not staying neutral. You're choosing a side." Price's eyes hardened. "This meeting is over." Outside the building, Clara stopped on the steps and gripped the railing so tightly her knuckles whitened. For a moment, Damon thought she might break down. Instead, she laughed once, bitter and cold. "He knew," she said. Damon looked back at the glass doors. "Yeah, he knew before we walked in. Then we go public." Clara turned to him. "You understand what that means. It means we stop asking people like him for permission." That evening, they met Theo Marlowe in a diner near the edge of town. Theo was younger than Damon expected, thin, restless with wire-framed glasses, and the exhausted eyes of someone who survived on caffeine and suspicion. He listened as Clara spoke, then opened his laptop and turned the screen toward them. "I've been investigating Iron Veil for 6 months," he said, "but what you have fills the holes I couldn't prove." On the screen was a diagram of companies and money transfers. Iron Veil Development connected to Northbridge Holdings, Northbridge connected to offshore accounts, inflated construction bids, fake consulting contracts, and political donations. "This isn't just environmental fraud," Theo said. "The resort is a washing machine. Money goes in dirty, comes out clean through construction costs and land sales." Damon stared at the screen. "How much money?" Theo exhaled. "Hundreds of millions." Clara went quiet. Damon could almost see her recalculating the danger. "That's why they burned the canyon," she said, "and why they'll do worse if this article gets close to publication," Theo replied. Damon looked from one to the other. "Then publish tonight." "I can't," Theo said. "Not if we want it to survive. My editor needs legal review. Every claim has to be nailed down. If we rush and get one detail wrong, Northbridge buries us in lawsuits." Clara's voice sharpened. "We may not have days." "You want the truth out?" Theo asked. Then let me make it impossible to deny. They worked through the night in Theo's apartment, cross-checking every file Clara had saved. Damon was not a lawyer or journalist, but he became useful in simpler ways. He made coffee. He sorted documents by dates. He caught inconsistencies because he asked basic questions no one else thought to ask. At 3 in the morning, Clara looked up from a stack of papers and found him staring at his phone. "Milo?" she asked. Damon nodded. There was a photo on the screen, Milo grinning with a missing front tooth holding up a science fair ribbon. "He thinks I'm working late. You should be with him." "I should be doing a lot of things. I dragged you into this." "No." Damon locked the phone and set it down. "I walked in." Clara studied him for a long moment. "Why?" He thought about the fire, about Price's cold smile, about the men on the trail, about Milo growing up in a world where powerful people could set land, truth, and lives on fire, then call it business. "Because if I walk away now," Damon said, "I become the kind of man I've spent 7 years teaching my son not to be." By dawn, Theo had enough. By afternoon, his editor had approved publication. By evening, the headline went live. "Luxury resort built on lies." Inside the Ironvale development scandal. The article spread like sparks in dry grass. First local news picked it up, then regional outlets, then national environmental reporters. Theo's evidence was devastating. Forged maps, bribed officials, hidden wetland destruction, shell companies, money trails. Clara remained unnamed as a source, but anyone behind Ironvale would know. Damon watched the story explode from Clara's hotel room, where she had moved after deciding her apartment was no longer safe. News alerts buzzed every few seconds. Clara's phone rang non-stop. Theo texted updates from the newsroom. The federal EPA had requested documents. The state attorney general had announced a preliminary review. For the first time, Damon allowed himself to breathe. "We did it," Clara whispered. "Started it," Damon corrected. She looked at him. "You never let me have anything, not false hope." Before Clara could respond, Damon's phone rang. "Nadine." He answered quickly. "Hey, everything okay?" There was no answer at first, only breathing, broken, panicked breathing. "Nadine, Damon," she said, her voice shaking. "Where's Milo?" Every sound in the room disappeared. "What do you mean? I went to pick him up from school. They said someone already signed him out." "They said it was you." Damon stood so fast the chair behind him fell over. "I didn't pick him up." Clara's face changed instantly. Nadine began to cry. "Then where is our son?" Damon could not speak. His hand tightened around the phone until his fingers hurt. The article was on the television behind him, his name not mentioned, Clara's face not shown. The truth finally moving through the world. And somewhere out there, because of that truth, his little boy was gone. Then Damon's phone buzzed again. Unknown number. He answered slowly and put it on speaker. A calm, male voice filled the room. "Mr. Brooks," the man said pleasantly, "I believe we need to discuss what happens next." The voice on the phone was calm enough to be mistaken for kindness, and that made it worse. Damon Brooks stood frozen in Clara Voss's hotel room, one hand gripping the edge of the desk, the other holding his phone as if it had turned into a weapon aimed straight at his heart. "Mr. Brooks," the man said again, pleasant and patient, "your son is safe, for now." Damon heard Clara inhale sharply beside him. Theo Marlowe stopped typing. The television behind them kept flashing headlines about Ironvale development, but the victory on the screen suddenly felt distant, almost cruel. "Let me hear him," Damon said. A pause, then a soft rustle. "Dad." Milo's voice was small, too small. Damon closed his eyes, and for one terrible second the room tilted beneath him. "Hey, buddy," he said, forcing his voice not to break. "Are you hurt?" "No, I'm okay. They said you sent them." Damon's chest caved inward. "Listen to me, Milo. I need you to stay calm. Do what they say. Don't argue. Don't try to run. I'm coming for you. You promise." Damon looked at the evidence scattered across the table, at Clara's pale face, at Theo's stunned silence. He had made promises before. Some small, some foolish. This one felt like it had to hold the weight of his entire life. "I promise," he said. The man returned to the line. Touching. "Now here is what happens. Ms. Voss will publicly withdraw her accusations. Mr. Marlowe will retract the article. You will say you were misled. Do that and the boy comes home tomorrow morning. And if we don't—" The man sighed as though disappointed in Damon's lack of manners. "Then you will spend the rest of your life wishing you had." The call ended. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Damon exploded. He swept the papers from the desk with one arm. Maps, copies, photographs, and folders flew across the carpet. He kicked the chair hard enough to send it crashing into the wall. The sound tore through the room, but it still was not louder than the fear inside him. "This is my fault," he said. "This is all my fault." Clara stepped toward him. "Damon!" "No." He backed away from her touch. "I had one job, keep my son safe. I dragged him into this because I wanted to be righteous. I wanted to be the man who didn't walk away. And now they have him." "You didn't take him," Clara said. "But I gave them a reason." That silenced her. Damon sank onto the edge of the bed and put both hands over his face. In his mind, he saw Milo at breakfast asking if he was going to do something stupid again. He had laughed then. He hated himself for that now. Theo spoke first. "We can call the FBI. They'll panic," Damon said. "They'll move him, or hurt him." "We can't just give them what they want," Clara said. Damon lifted his head. His eyes were red, but his voice had gone cold. "If saving my son means destroying your evidence, I'll burn it myself." Clara absorbed that like a blow. A day earlier, Damon would have apologized. A day earlier, he would have tried to soften the words. But something inside him had changed. The man who ran into a fire had acted on instinct. The man sitting in that hotel room now understood that courage without control could become another kind of danger. Milo did not need a hero. Milo needed his father alive, thinking, choosing carefully. Clara looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Okay." Damon blinked. "Okay. We tell them we'll do it. We buy time. We make them believe they've won." Her voice steadied with every word. "But we do not surrender. We find Milo." Theo adjusted his glasses with shaking fingers. "I might be able to help with that." He opened his laptop again, this time moving fast. His fear had become focus. Damon watched as he dug through property records, old business registrations, utility bills, and corporate filings. Clara joined him, her injury forgotten, her mind working like a blade. They traced Northbridge Holdings through layers of legal fog until Theo found a commercial warehouse on the east side of town owned by one of Northbridge's shell companies. "It's listed as vacant," Theo said, "but someone has been paying full utilities for 2 years." Damon stood. "That's where he is." "We don't know that," Clara said. "It's where we start." Nadine arrived 20 minutes later, face streaked with tears, fury burning through the fear. She slapped Damon across the face before he could say a word. "You promised me he was safe with you," she said. Damon accepted the blow without moving. "I know. You brought this to our son. I know." Her anger cracked, and suddenly she was sobbing against his chest. Damon held her because there was nothing else he could do. Clara looked away, giving them what little privacy the room allowed. "I'll get him back," Damon whispered. Nadine pulled away. "Don't promise me something you can't control." That hurt because it was true. So Damon said the harder thing. "I'll do everything I can, and I won't do it alone." It was the first honest answer he had given all day. By dusk, Theo had contacted a man named Gavin Rook, a former military security consultant who owed him a favor. Gavin was not impressed by desperation. He listened to the story in a quiet diner booth, his face unreadable, then looked directly at Damon. "You want to run in there and tear the building apart?" Gavin said. "Yes. That will get your son moved or killed." Damon's jaw tightened, but he did not argue. Gavin nodded once as if that restraint mattered. "Good. Then maybe you can still help him." They approached the warehouse after dark, not like heroes, not like soldiers in some glorious story, but like terrified people trying to make one careful choice after another. Theo confirmed movement inside. Gavin took control. Clara remained near the vehicles, coordinating with a federal contact she finally trusted enough to call once they had visual proof. Nadine stayed on the phone with Damon until the last possible second. Her final words, simple and raw. "Bring our baby home." Inside the warehouse, every shadow seemed alive. Damon moved behind Gavin, heart-hammering hands empty because Gavin had refused to give him anything more dangerous than a flashlight. "You're here for your son," Gavin had told him, "not revenge." Those words stayed with Damon as they climbed the back stairwell. Not revenge, not rage, Milo. They found him in a room on the second floor, sitting on a thin mattress beneath a buzzing fluorescent light. 2 guards stood outside. Gavin handled them quickly with terrifying efficiency, and Theo forced the door open. Dad Damon crossed the room in 2 strides and dropped to his knees. Milo crashed into him, arms locking around his neck, small body shaking. "I knew you'd come," Milo whispered. Damon could not answer. He pressed his face into his son's hair and breathed. They almost made it out. At the loading dock, a man stepped from the shadows, flanked by armed guards. He wore a tailored coat and the relaxed smile of someone who had spent his life making other people afraid. "Mr. Brooks," he said, "you disappoint me." Clara's voice answered from behind Damon. "Victor Langford." Victor smiled wider. "Ms. Voss, still standing. I admire that. You ordered the fire. I ordered a problem solved. You kidnapped a child. I applied pressure." Damon pushed Milo behind him. The old Damon, the one ruled by impulse, might have charged at Victor and gotten them all killed. But the man standing there now knew the difference between courage and stupidity. His son's fingers were gripping his shirt. That was enough to keep him still. "You lost," Damon said. Victor laughed softly. "No. People like me rarely lose." Then red and blue lights flooded the broken windows. Victor's smile faltered. Clara lifted her phone. "You should have checked whether Theo's article was the only thing we sent out." Federal agents stormed the warehouse minutes later. Victor shouted orders no one obeyed. His guards dropped their weapons. Gavin stepped away from the scene before too many questions could find him. Theo recorded everything until an agent told him to stop. Damon carried Milo outside into the cold night. Nadine ran to them across the cracked parking lot. She pulled Milo from Damon's arms and held him so tightly the boy squeaked. Then she reached for Damon too, dragging him into the embrace without asking. For the first time since the phone call, Damon broke. He cried quietly, one hand on Milo's back, the other gripping Nadine's sleeve. Not because everything was fixed, it wasn't. Milo trembled when a car door slammed. Nadine could barely look at Damon without pain in her eyes. Clara stood apart near an ambulance, exhausted and pale guilt written all over her face. But Milo was alive. That was the first piece of mercy. Later, after statements and paramedics and questions that seemed to go on forever, Damon found Clara sitting on the curb outside the warehouse. Her injured leg was stretched in front of her. Her hands were wrapped around a paper cup of water she had not touched. "I'm sorry," she said before he could speak. Damon sat beside her. "I know." "No, you don't." Her voice cracked. "Your son was taken because of me. He was taken because Victor Langford is a monster." "But I brought the monster to your door." Damon looked toward the ambulance where Milo sat with Nadine, a blanket around his shoulders. "Maybe. And I walked through it." Clara turned to him, eyes wet. "I hated you for a few hours," Damon admitted. "I hated myself more. I thought if I had walked away from you in that fire, none of this would have happened." Clara looked down. "But then Victor would still be out there," Damon continued. "Ironvale would still be building. Price would still be taking bribes. The canyon would still be gone. And Milo would have a father who survived by letting someone else die." His voice lowered. "I don't know how to feel okay about what happened. I don't know if I ever will. But I know this wasn't just your fault. And it wasn't just mine." Clara closed her eyes as if the words hurt and healed at the same time. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we tell the truth. All of it. Then I take my son home. And us." Damon did not answer right away. He was too tired to pretend certainty, too changed to hide behind silence. "I don't know," he said, "but I know I don't want to walk away angry." Clara nodded slowly. "I can start there." At sunrise, the first news vans arrived. Victor Langford had been arrested. Northbridge Holdings was under federal investigation. Commissioner Price's name was already appearing in leaked documents. Iron Vale's empire had begun to crack. Damon watched the lights spill over the city with Milo asleep against his side in the back of the ambulance. Clara stood a few feet away speaking to an agent. Nadine leaned against the ambulance door, exhausted but calmer now. Everything was damaged, but not everything was lost. For the first time, Damon understood that healing was not the same as going back to who you were before. Fire did not return a forest to its old shape. It cleared scarred, exposed, and then, if the roots were strong enough, something new pushed through. Damon looked down at his son and touched his hair gently. They had survived the fire. Now they had to learn how to live after it. 3 weeks after Victor Langford's arrest, Damon Brooks walked into the county courthouse with his son's hand in his. Milo did not need to be there, not officially. Nadine had argued against it at first, and Damon had agreed with her until Milo quietly asked if the bad man was really going away. That was when Damon understood something he had been avoiding. Safety was not just locked doors, police reports, or promises whispered at bedtime. Sometimes, safety had to be seen. Sometimes a frightened child needed to watch the person who hurt him lose power in a room full of witnesses. So Milo came. He wore a blue button-down shirt, his hair combed flat for once, though one stubborn curl had already escaped above his forehead. His small fingers held Damon's tightly as they passed through security. Nadine walked on Milo's other side, steady and watchful. A year ago, Damon and Nadine could barely stand in the same room without old resentment rising between them. Now they moved like two people who had finally remembered they were on the same side. Clara Voss was waiting near the courtroom doors. Her limp was barely visible now, but Damon still noticed it. He noticed everything about her, the calm posture, the tired eyes, the way her expression softened when she saw Milo. "Hey, brave man," Clara said. Milo looked up at her. "Is he going to jail today?" Clara crouched carefully so they were eye level. "The judge is deciding what happens before the trial, but he can't hurt you anymore." Milo absorbed that. Then he nodded once as if filing it somewhere important. Inside the courtroom was packed. Reporters filled the back rows. Environmental activists sat beside local residents whose homes and land had nearly been swallowed by Iron Vale's greed. Theo Marlowe sat near the front with a notebook on his knee, no longer just chasing a story, but watching one reach its reckoning. Victor Langford entered in an orange jumpsuit. The first time Damon had seen him, Victor had stood in a warehouse with armed men around him, smiling like the world belonged to him. Now he looked smaller. Not harmless, not innocent, but reduced. Power had left his posture. His expensive suit was gone. His calm had cracked around the edges. Milo's grip tightened. Damon leaned down. "You're safe, I know," Milo whispered, but he did not look away. The hearing began with charges read into the record: conspiracy, fraud, money laundering, environmental crimes, arson, kidnapping, intimidation of witnesses, bribery of public officials. Each word seemed to land with its own weight. Victor's lawyers tried to object, delay, soften, redirect. The judge, a sharp-eyed woman with no patience for polished excuses, cut through every attempt. "This court is not interested in theater," she said. "We are here for accountability." Then came the statements. Clara spoke first. She stood at the podium without notes. For years, she had built her reputation on control, precision, and strength. But this time, her voice carried something deeper than professionalism. "I thought I was investigating a dishonest business deal," Clara said. "I believed the worst thing Iron Vale had done was lie on paper. But paper lies become real destruction. A false map becomes a bulldozer. A bribed signature becomes a burned canyon. A hidden account becomes a child taken from school. The courtroom went still. Clara turned toward Victor. You believed money made you untouchable. You believed fear could erase truth. But you made one mistake. You forgot that people who have already survived fire are not easy to silence. Damon watched her step away from the podium, and for the first time, he did not see the woman he had carried out of the smoke. He saw the woman who had walked back toward danger again and again, not because she was fearless, but because she refused to let fear make her smaller. Then Damon was called. He had practiced what to say. He had written it down, crossed it out, written it again. But when he reached the podium and saw Milo sitting between Nadine and Clara, the prepared words disappeared. I'm not a public person, Damon began. I build houses. I fix roofs. I raise my kid. Before all of this, I thought doing the right thing meant taking care of the people under my own roof. He looked at Victor. Then I heard someone calling for help in a fire. I went back because I couldn't live with leaving her there. I didn't know her name. I didn't know about Iron Veil. I didn't know that one choice would pull my son into danger. His voice tightened, but he kept going. For a while, I hated that choice. I hated myself for it. I thought maybe if I had just driven away, Milo would never have been taken. But that's what men like you count on. You count on good people blaming themselves until they stop fighting back. Victor stared at the table. Damon's voice grew steadier. My son has nightmares because of you. He asks if locked doors are enough. He checks the driveway when cars slow down. That is what you did to a 7-year-old child. I can't erase that, but I can stand here and show him that fear doesn't get the final word. Milo's eyes were wet, but he was sitting taller now. Damon turned back to the judge. I don't know what justice is supposed to feel like. It doesn't bring back peace overnight. It doesn't make a child forget. But I hope it means men like Victor Langford learn that money can buy silence for a while, not forever. When Damon returned to his seat, Milo climbed into his lap without asking. Damon held him one arm around his son, one hand covering the boy's heart. The judge denied Victor's bail. He would remain in custody until trial. Edwin Price, the corrupt commissioner, had already resigned and was under federal indictment. Northbridge Holdings had been frozen. Iron Veil Development was shut down permanently. The canyon was no longer for sale. Outside the courthouse, reporters shouted questions. Clara answered some. Theo answered more. Damon avoided the microphones and walked with Nadine and Milo toward the parking lot. Nadine stopped beside his truck. You did good in there. Damon gave a tired smile. That almost sounded like a compliment. It was. She looked at Milo, who was kicking a pebble across the pavement. He needed to hear you say those things. I think I needed to hear them too. Nadine nodded. For a moment they stood in the quiet remains of their old life. There had been love once, then disappointment, then distance. Now there was something different. Not romance, not regret. Peace. I'm sorry, Damon said. Nadine looked at him. For what? For the years I made you the villain in my head because it was easier than admitting we were both tired and hurt. Her eyes softened. I'm sorry, too. For leaving badly. For making you feel like you had to carry everything alone. They did not hug. They did not need to. Some forgiveness arrived quietly without ceremony. Clara joined Damon after Nadine drove away with Milo. The courthouse steps were almost empty now. Afternoon sun warmed the stone. For once, nobody was running, hiding, or fighting for their lives. You were right, Damon said. Clara raised an eyebrow. About what I enjoy hearing that. About showing up. I would have regretted not coming. She smiled, but there was sadness in it too. What happens now? Damon looked toward the street where ordinary people crossed at the light carrying coffee, groceries, briefcases. The world kept moving no matter what broke inside a person. Maybe healing was learning to move with it. Now I take Milo home, he said. I get him help. Real help. Maybe get some for myself, too. That sounds wise. Don't tell anyone. I have a reputation. Clara laughed softly. The sound loosened something in him. Over the next months, life did not become simple, but it became livable. Milo saw a counselor every Wednesday. Sometimes he talked. Sometimes he drew pictures of smoke warehouses and doors with locks. Slowly, the drawings changed. Trees appeared, then a blue truck, then Clara standing beside Damon and Milo under a yellow sun. Victor's trial ended with a conviction on every major count. The sentence was long enough that Milo asked if Victor would be old like a dinosaur when he got out. Damon told him probably. Milo seemed satisfied. Theo's reporting won awards, though he insisted the real victory was that Raven Creek Canyon had been declared a protected conservation area. At the dedication ceremony, Damon tried to refuse the microphone until Clara gave him a look that made refusal impossible. He stood before the crowd, Milo in the front row, Clara beside him, and spoke the only truth he knew. "I used to think courage was a big thing," Damon said. "Something loud, something fearless. But I was terrified when I ran into that fire. I was terrified when my son was taken. I'm still terrified sometimes. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's deciding fear doesn't get to choose who you become." The crowd applauded. Milo clapped the loudest. Later that day, the three of them hiked the restored trail. Wildflowers had begun to grow between blackened roots. The canyon still carried scars, but green life pushed through them, stubborn and bright. "This is where you found me," Clara said, touching the old boulder. Damon looked at the place where everything had changed. "This is where you told me to leave you." "You didn't listen. I'm bad at instructions." Milo ran ahead, then turned back. "Are you guys going to get married or what?" Damon nearly tripped. Clara laughed so hard she had to sit on the boulder. "Subtle kid," Damon muttered. "I learned from you," Milo said. A year later, under the same canyon sky that had once been black with smoke, Damon and Clara were married in a small ceremony. Milo carried the rings with grave importance. Nadine came with her new partner and cried more than she admitted. Theo gave a toast about truth. Gavin Rook appeared in a suit, said almost nothing, and somehow scared the catering staff into perfect efficiency. During their vows, Clara took Damon's hands. "You ran into fire for a stranger," she said. "But you stayed for the truth, for your son, for me. I promise to stay too. When life burns, when fear comes, when the road is unclear, I will not walk away." Damon's voice was rough when he answered. "I thought saving you was one decision, but it became the beginning of everything. I promise to choose you, choose this family, and keep choosing what is right even when it costs more than I think I can pay." They kissed while Milo made a disgusted face and clapped anyway. That evening, Damon stood on the edge of the reception patio with Clara's hand in his and Milo leaning against his side. The canyon stretched before them, scarred but alive. Damon understood then that nothing had returned to what it had been. Not the land, not his son, not him. But maybe that was not the point. Fire changed whatever it touched. It destroyed, yes, but it also revealed what could survive. It burned away illusions. It left only roots, truth, and the things worth rebuilding. Damon had gone into the flames as a man trying to save one stranger. He came out as a father who understood that family was not only what you protected from danger. Family was who stood with you after the danger passed, helping you become whole again. And as the stars appeared over Raven Creek Canyon, Damon finally believed what he had promised his son. They were safe, they were changed, and they were home.